good evening. One down, 29 to go. But before I say anything about this precious movie, it was the last movie that we watched tonight, and the first two, I'll just say a little bit about. The first we watched was the remake, the 2006, I think, remake of When a Stranger Calls. Having watched the original a couple of nights ago, it was expiring, so we watched it then, and now the new one became available, and so we watched it. And it's a movie I watched at a Halloween party in middle school. That's the first and only time I had seen it, but for some reason it stuck with me. The whole "Have you checked the children?" I find that creepier than Clarice, the Anthony Hopkins thing. And that was apparently enough that it stuck with me. Also, whenever you see the THX logo in a movie and you get that music that goes with the THX logo, digitally mastered in THX, that music I think was originally from that movie in 1979 with Carol Kane as a babysitter who gets a creepy call. At least that's the first 10 minutes of the movie. The first 10 minutes of When a Stranger Calls are the only part of the movie that's actually When a Stranger Calls. Most of the rest of it is when a retired police officer turned private detective pursues a man about whom he knows just about everything there is to know, and therefore the guy is not a stranger anymore. And then the last 15 to 20 minutes, it's kind of When a Stranger Calls Back, when Carol Kane's character returns. But I think When a Stranger Calls Back was the actual sequel to that movie, so it's got to be something else then. But the parts when Carol Kane was in it were the best parts of that movie. But it's not the movie that I remembered. In the remake, I said when we watched it, I said they should. I thought this was all about the babysitter, and that it was the babysitter's adventure with the stranger calling, and that is what the remake is, and that's also wrong. So I don't know that there's a good full-length feature film in When a Stranger Calls, but there are a couple of good 10, 15, 20-minute movies in the original. And then we watched Batman vs. Dracula in preparation for watching Dracula, and it's turned out, I mean, I had no expectations, but it turned out to be one of my favorite Batman things and one of my favorite Dracula things. Very clever use of Dracula, comparing him to Batman as a character of urban legend, and of course visually, plenty of that. Clever use of Penguin and Joker, and Batman, of course, in order to defeat Dracula, pursues a cure for vampirism. Also, creative use of Carmilla. I'm going to read a passage of Carmilla. I've already read it. It'll be posted. It's a vampire novella from before Dracula, and she's quite a character herself. But the main event was the 1931 Dracula, which ushered in the era of the Universal monsters. Bela Lugosi playing Dracula opened on Valentine's Day of 1931, and I guess it's appropriate since they really played up the romance, the romantic angle. I guess that's what was big in movies and plays at the time, because it's based on a 1927 play that also starred Bela Lugosi as Dracula. And it feels like a play. It's got long scenes where characters enter and exit in the same room. A lot is done in a single set, in a single scene. Renfield pops up a lot. It felt, especially now that I think the last time I saw this movie, I wasn't big on plays, but now I am. I can recognize a play when I see one, and this is definitely a play that was filmed. Also filmed, while this was being filmed, a Spanish language version, which is included in this box set behind me, probably on this disc, or within. It's sort of one of those things where it's got, you open it up, and the inner thing pops out, but it's got multiple discs. Dracula Spanish version, yes, so it's in here. I may watch that, not as part of this whole thing, but I've got it different cast. It was filmed in the evening or overnight on the same sets. I really like this. I don't know. I was gonna say if it's. I don't say gonna say I don't know if it's my favorite Dracula. I don't know that I have a favorite adaptation of Dracula. This and Frankenstein. I am very picky about my adaptations, but it might be my favorite just by default. It was the first one, and it feels the best to me. His performance as Dracula feels the most like Dracula would be, not too human, not too monster. Um, he kind of like he's got a stiffness about him, but he's also charming in a way that like he's actively trying to charm and disarm the human people, his potential victims. So I really like that aspect of it. Um, it was interesting, and I'd always noticed this, but now I notice it in a more discerning context. The fade outs at the end of the scenes, which again are very play like scenes that would have go to blackout, curtain down, that sort of thing. The fade outs are very abrupt. They happen when the characters are still talking, oftentimes, and I just had to remind myself as I'm watching it, oh, it's because they were still kind of figuring out what they were doing with movies, especially this is a talkie and is 1931. I think the first talkies were 1927, 1929, and they made a lot of movies per year back then. But I think they were still kind of getting a sense of making the fade out work. I don't know. I don't take my word on that. Watch the Story of Film documentary series on Hulu. I've been meaning to. Um, but yeah, great performance from him, and also the guy. Let's see, Edward Van Sloan played Van Helsing. Uh, very interesting, weird, quirky old man character. A foreigner among the English, like Dracula, so he had more fun with it, I think, than the people who were just playing boring English people, and they were boring, even though the characters are not boring in the book. Jonathan Harker is much more interesting in the book because he actually has more of a journey with Dracula than in this and most adaptations. Mina, much more interesting in the book. Got a little Annie Oakley moment toward the end, and people always leave out the fact that she has a job. She's not just Harker's fiance. She has a job. She has skills. She's a career woman in the novel, and always left out. I don't think I've seen a single adaptation of Dracula where she has a job, unless it's in the modern day when everybody has jobs. Lucy, another person never used to full effect, except somewhat ironically in the Frank Wildhorn version of Dracula, the musical from 2004. I'm not a huge fan of that musical, but her number was perfect for her character, and it was hilarious in and of itself. She's barely in the movie. Renfield, another great one. Let's see who plays Renfield. Dwight Fry. I don't know who any of these people are there, but I've probably seen them in other movies of this age. But Renfield is one of the more memorable parts of the movie. His whole rats, possession thing, his laugh on the ship and throughout, but mostly on the ship when when the ship arrives and the crew's all been killed, and he's discovered insane in the hold, and his laugh is whenever in a book it describes there was a laugh that sounded like it was from someone who was demented or something. His is the laugh that I hear. Specifically, if you've read The Book of Dust, La Belle Sauvage by Philip Pullman, there's a hyena in the book who is described as laughing, and it spells out the laughter, and I always heard Renfield's laugh. And he's also got one of the great lines. They're talking about Dracula's a vampire. We have to do certain things to protect from vampires, and Renfield enters because he can escape very easily from the asylum, and he says, "Isn't this a strange conversation for two sane men to be having, for two men who aren't crazy?" And it's so great from Renfield throughout. And then it kind of speeds to the end. Unlike the book, the ending is very drawn out. Uh, in a play in 1927, I wouldn't have expected them to try to do what happens in the book. It makes sense that it happens the way that it happens here if it's based on a Broadway play. Um, and so I'm okay with that. Dracula is really not about the ending, it's about the journey. It's about the characters and how they change when they become vampires. Um, let's see if there's anything else that I can think of. Uh, when I first heard about this and the other classic monster movies, um, the big deal at that time was there's a version of Dracula with a quartet playing a Philip Glass score. That the movie was scored for the first time. I like listening to it without background music, just the dialogue, as probably would be the case in the play. Um, so glad this version didn't have the score. I'm sure it's great music and it sounds wonderful. Um, so that's going to be that. I want to try to keep these videos short. Tomorrow night is Frankenstein, released in the same year but later, and somewhat tied. It has almost had a very big connection to this movie other than the shared universe thing. So listen to the Children of the Night, and yeah, that's. I don't want to say something that's not from Animorphs as my sign off for this, but that's not going to be it. And I don't have anything, so I'm just going to end it now rather than keeping on talking. Passage from Dracula, the earlier video, probably up here at this point. Two passages probably from Dracula up here at this point. And I will be reading selections from the stories that these things are based on throughout, so look for those videos as well. And I will talk more about these movies tomorrow night. I think this went well. I can do this 29, 30 more times.